Okay, welcome everyone to our review of the Vulcan. Hello, I had to look at my notes then because I forgot the episode name. Yes,
And the Battle of the Binary Stars as well.
and the Battle of the Binary Stars.
This is, I believe, the first Star Trek pilot to have two different titles, because it's a two-parter with two different episode titles.
It is indeed. It's also the very first Star Trek episode to not have the episode name highlighted in the start after the teaser, after the credits, after the opening.
Because they stopped doing that after Enterprise. Yeah.
They did indeed.
As an ode to Klingons, we have a redundant title for the second part of the pilot.
Yes, indeed. So yes, we're starting with Discovery. This is going to be the last pilot we watch as part of our pilots review. Sorry, Shai, we'll do the man trap as it comes out.
No, it's absolutely wrong. This is up for debate. The man trap is absolutely the TOS pilot.
Look, the shadowy Starfleet cabal of admirals who judge Burnham have judged Mantrap not to be the one that we will review, so we can't go against them, I'm afraid.
Because everyone knows it's where no man has gone before. But anyway, we're here to talk about Star Trek Discovery, the first new, in what people call New Trek, the first new Star Trek series to emerge in the Kurtzman era outside of Berman's reign of terror over Star Trek, or whatever you might want to say it. But yes, this was the 2017 launched a brand new Star Trek to varying degrees of criticism. Some people loved it, some people didn't like it, some people were ambivalent. This is definitely a very polarizing series, brought to you by Alex Kurtzman, who was one of the writers from the J.J. Abrams series of movies, came on to showrun and basically spearhead a new era of Star Trek 2, which has had mixed results. Lots of different things have come out to it, and what we can now say is a new golden age. No disputing, we are now in a new golden age of Star Trek as of this date, 2022. We have 5 series on. It's immensely popular at the time. But this was the opening. This was the moment where it kind of went like, this is... Sorry.
Can we have Shai speak for all the boomers as to whether or not this is a golden era or not?
Is this the third golden age, would it be?
Well, I have a number of boomer friends. First of all, I'm Gen X, thank you very much. But I do have a number of boomer friends who are split on this as well. Like some of them are very much about old school TOS Star Trek, and they will have none of this new Trek. And some of them love it. And the ones that are right love it. Yeah, I find this to be a new golden age of Trek. I'm a big fan.
Regardless, I mean, there's been split opinions on, and I'll just very quickly say this won't be a big talking point, but anyone's opinions on Kurtzman. Yeah, he can't write for shit. Like he's not a great writer, but what he has done for Star Trek over these last 5 years has been, I'm glad he has. I'm glad someone's been there to sort of herald a new age and have the amount of diversity that gave us Lower Decks, that gives us Prodigies, that give us a new Strange New Worlds. And regardless of your opinions on Discovery, you like it, you don't. That's up to you. But we're here to talk about the Vulcan Hello, which was...
Well, you do have to give him credit for, there is something to be said for someone who can put the right creatives in the right place to do the right thing. Like, let's be real here. Like, that's a skill all of its own. If you don't have the right people in the right place, it doesn't matter how many good ingredients you have, you end up with shit. So, you've got to give him credit for that.
But yeah, so very first pilot episode of Star Trek Discovery. Now, this was originally pitched by Brian Fuller of American Gods and did he do Eureka? There was a few other series he did.
He did Pushing Daisies, which I
that's the one I'm thinking of.
I love Pushing Daisies.
Yeah, that was one of his
Hannibal
series
as well.
This was his pitch. Yeah, he'd been pitching a Star Trek series for years and years and years, and he'd wanted to get one off the road. And I think by this time, Into Darkness had finished. Star Trek Beyond was sort of now starting to come out in cinemas, where people sort of like, they started to pitch this new series and interest started to peak around it, and I think they finally said, all right, have your damn series. And then before it aired, he ended up getting kicked off it anyway because he was too busy doing American Gods. So,
well, it's also because his original concept was that they would do an anthology series, and they were like, fuck that, you pick one of your ideas because that's cost effective. And it's also worth noting that Brian Fuller did have previous. You might notice that he is credited in tons of Voyager episodes, specifically as I think editor or scriptwriter, I believe. Like he's actually credited for Voyager, so he has previous on Star Trek.
Absolutely. One of his quotes when first trying to pitch the series was, "Love to return to the spirit of the old series with the colours and attitude of the 60s fun. I would love to take it back to its origin. Star Trek has to recreate itself, otherwise all the characters start to feel the same. You always have the captain, a doctor, a security officer, and you can have the same arguments based on those perspectives. It starts to feel too familiar, so all those paradigms where it takes place in a starship have to be shaken up," which is you kind of feel that with a little bit with Discovery as it goes on throughout the series. But I feel like a lot of his sentiments there kind of get echoed in Strange New Worlds, where they kind of do go back to say, oh, we're going to reinvent Star Trek but keep it Star Trek.
Well, it's that thing of, like, when you say recreate Star Trek, that means different things to different people. Like, Star Trek intrinsically means different things to different people, because, you were talking about Golden Ages, and there are people who will... You can say, oh, well, clearly the golden age of Star Trek was the 1990s. And they'll be like, no, it wasn't. It was the 60s. And it's like, is it? It's like, and then there are people who absolutely can't stand the noughties because they're like, oh, Enterprise and the Kelvin verse is like, that's not my Star Trek. Or was it the 80s with the TOS movies and the beginning of TNG? Like, different people come out with what they value differently.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting that Fuller said I wanted something in the original Attitude TOS, because I can't see anything that's like
other than a few
of that in this pilot here. Like recreating it, absolutely. And I, especially going into season 1 of Discovery and going like in the wider structure, he absolutely breaks down that rigid adherence to what is your main cast. It's the bridge crew. You have your doctor, you have your tactical officer, you have your your science officer, operations chief, you have your engineer, and then instead in Discovery it's who are your main characters. Well, it's someone who is technically not in Starfleet because they've mutinied. It's an exomycologist. It's kind of the chief medical officer, but not really. It's a cadet. It's the security chief, and the captain is a main character, but like not given the focus. And that changes as time goes on. Like, Discovery has a lot of mission creep. Like, you can see it really change with every new showrunner. And you can see some of that lack of focus in this pilot a little bit. Although it's something that becomes way more acute later on in the season when they lose Brian Fuller and they start to lose some of the more stabilizing elements. But I don't know, this is an interesting way to take Trek. But
If we're sticking to the pilot, yeah, I smiled when you said we're not going to rehash the same thing. The first thing that came to mind is, and we said this while we were watching it, is sort of the triumvirate, the bickering earlier on, is sort of the Spock, McCoy, the Kirk thing. So regardless of whether or not it should be in the pilot, that's like the one thing that jumped to mind. We're not going to have the same arguments. It's like, well, you kind of with these three, I think we all know that's what they were going for.
Yeah.
Shai, how excited were you when you heard that Nicholas Meyer was attached to this?
I was super excited. I had attended the Star Trek 50th anniversary convention in New York City, like Mission NYC, the year before, in 2016, I believe. And Nicholas Meyer was there with a bunch of the other like creators, and he was talking about it. And they showed some very early. Nothing really. It was just like some early graphics. Not even the ship. I don't.
Was it the
believe.
one with the? Oh, not even the ship. Oh my! I was going to say the first
It
one.
might have been the ship. I'm not sure, but it was all very early. They hadn't really cast the whole thing yet, and but
the very first...
at that time we thought it was coming out at the end of 2016 for the 50th anniversary, and they kind of overshot it by like 6 months or so. But
remember the very early teaser being just the Discovery itself coming out of space dock, and a few of the fans kind of went, oh wait, that's the Ralph McQuarrie. If anyone goes back and looks at the Google Ralph McQuarrie Enterprise, and you get exactly the same design as Discovery, so it's very much based
Ralph
on that.
McQuarrie being the guy who basically did all the incredibly formative concept art for Star Wars, the X-Wings and stuff like that are pretty much his design, so incredibly influential 1970s sci-fi designer. And the Discovery design is really fucking cool.
Yeah. And I do see a lot of TOS touches in this episode. Just even you have Burnham being a Maverick right from the top. You have the homage to Star Trek: The Motion Picture with her doing the EV suit launch into the asteroid field. If you listen to the background bridge noise, it's straight out of the TOS sound design. All that's echoing back and forth.
I think they had to do a lot of callback because they explicitly said this is 10 years before TOS. Like, so there was going to be, you were going to see the things like, that J.J. Abrams did on the Kelvinverse films, where there's a lot of familiar noise, and you kind of like, you do the whole things. I recognize that noise, the finger pointing and Leo memes all over the place. They do a little bit of that to keep people familiar.
Yeah,
As a very brief. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say we're going to talk about this scene a lot later, but just the logic battle with the computer.
Yeah.
That's pure TOS scene. But what were you gonna say, Otto?
Yeah, as a brief aside, the one thing that New Trek I think absolutely nails is the little musical homages. Whether it's like the Voyager theme, the first time you see Seven and Picard, or stuff they've done with Strange New Worlds, is like it's hard to go. In order to be gratuitous in that sense, it would have to be like, like a 5-minute schluck through the entire like intro. And they really don't do that, but they put the hooks in there that everyone recognizes. And that's like, if you're going to go for the nostalgia hit, that's, I think, one of the best ways to do it.
Yeah, and I mentioned this during the watch through. Even the Discovery theme is just a nice, clever inversion of the intervals in the original. Instead of da 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 da, it's da da. It's a nice inversion of the original.
Yeah, it's actually funny because the year before Rogue One, Michael Giacchino, who is also attached to Trek now, did the same thing with the Rogue One theme, where it's the negative of the notes, as it were, and it's like playing them together, you get the full thing, and it's a nice little bit of musical language. So I think it has to be said that the one thing I absolutely love about New Trek, and especially about Discovery, everything about the production design, like your mileage may vary on some of the individual design choices for certain races, especially the Klingons, but it always looks good. There is never a corner cut, and it's like, you recognize certain sets to get redressed, but it's a case of they're not made out of money. I think you mentioned, Idle, that the budget for these episodes, $6 or $7 million each?
It's a lot, yeah.
And they spend the money fairly wisely. They don't spend it on creating a million different sets of the same identical quarters. They spend it on making sure that you've got realistic damage mapping on the Shenzhou when it gets blown to crap. When you've got really good astrophysics designs, you've got everyone in incredibly ornate Klingon samurai armor that looks awesome.
You see it on the screen. I never understood the complaint that this show looks cheap or.
I don't know.
I don't get that complaint.
No, I think
people were saying that early on, but I think that was just a knee-jerk reaction to the content of the show, so that was their go-to complaint about it.
I can also see that for the Klingon thing, because that was the big design choice that everyone was piling on early on. So, Stars, what you say ties into something I wanted to talk about, which is that, are you getting 10 episodes a season, or do you want 24 episodes a season? Because even now, it's kind of funny. I'm not that old, all right? I'm in my 30s, but I'll sit down and watch a series in old black and white with someone. And then, we go to the episode select, and it's 29 episodes. They're like, whoa, how'd they do that many? And it's well, it's a different era. You're not getting, they didn't have the $7 million budgets, but they had. So it's a trade-off. You want these slick-looking sets and CGI and stuff, or do you want the extra content of double the episodes? And I know my answer, but I want to hear your guys. So, Idle, you tell me what you like and why.
I think I like.
It's okay to say both, but then you have to justify both sides.
You do have to justify both. I think I like the longer ones, and getting 24 episodes is fine if they can fill it with quality content. I don't mind bottle episodes. Some of my favourite episodes in Star Trek and Doctor Who and whatever are bottle episodes, because they have to work within the constraints of their environment, and actually that ends up with a lot more cerebral thinking. You end up getting kind of like Beverly Crusher's trapped on a ship on her own in a warp bubble. It ends up actually being quite crazy and interesting. But at the same time, I also like compressed episodes because you get a lot more... visual aesthetic, which I also like. So... I think there's room for a hybrid, which is kind of where I think Strange New Worlds sort of succeeded, although that was a shorter season. I think they managed to sort of do a bottle episode as well as that is cerebral, as well as doing a sort of high effects budget thing. Everyone wants more of the good shit. They like the stuff they enjoy, they want more of it. I think because Discovery is a serialized show, it works better to be a shorter season, say 10 to 13 episodes. I think that's fine. You don't want something like the CW series, if anyone watched those, like Flash and Arrow, where you're just going through filler episode and show, and you're just like, they're running out of ideas and they're just spanning out because they wanted a 25 order season. And TNG never felt like that. Voyager never felt like they were just spinning the wheels for episodes. Everyone, it was high concept sci-fi. But I think with something like Discovery, because it is serialized, they're telling one story over the series, or over the set of 13 episodes. It makes more sense. So I think it depends on the format. There's my diplomatic answer.
It depends. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Cop out. Yeah.
For me, I will always come down on the hammer of higher quality, less episodes. Because it's partly a consideration for the actors and the writers, because if you look back at the stories, that especially like the TNG or the DS9 or Voyager cast tell about 8 to 10 to 12-hour days, like if you're doing prosthetic work like Armin Shimmerman or Michael Dornwood, and you're on set, you're just doing these takes after takes after takes after takes, and then you're doing 24, 25, 26 episodes a season, a year. And it's like, that is an enormous toll on you as an actor, as a performer, as a writing staff. You have to cut out 24 different scripts with different ideas featuring the same crew. And depending on which show you're on, they're allowed to develop or they're not. And you have to keep track of where they are as characters. And then there's a lot less flexibility allowed for the actors, because they don't get to. It's like, here's the script, you go. We have not got time for you to give your actorly input. Like, you might get a bit of improv or an idea thrown in on the thing, but it depends on how flexible the director is. And as I recall, that was part of the problem that meant that Anson Mount wasn't sure about coming back as Pike when they originally Pike pitched the idea to him. Was like, I've got a family, man. I don't want to live halfway across the world in Toronto away from my family so I can shoot long seasons. And that's part of the reason why I think The Strange New Worlds went down from the 13 of Discovery down to 10. So I think that in terms of taking care of your actors and your writing staff and your directorial stuff and making sure that you just have time to put it out, I think the 10 episodes is a good fit. And I also think that way you end up with a lot less chaff. Because let's be real here. Out of maybe a 24-episode season, how many of those episodes are good? How many of them are great? How many of them are fucking terrible? How often do you end up with a threshold?
It depends on the
show. Well, yeah, it depends on the show. Like DS9, for example, you get maybe 2 or 3 duff episodes a season because they're really tight, right? But with TNG, especially as it went season 6, season 7, Voyager,
Meridian on this show.
How dare you?
How could I? Let me take aim at that cult classic. Let he who is without sin. Fuck off. And it's that doesn't really happen with something like Discovery or Lower Decks or Prodigy or Strange New Worlds, because you can't have an absolutely duff shit episode. I remember when we did our watch through of Strange New Worlds, there was 1 or 2 episodes that we were like, I'm not vibing with this as much. But it wasn't a case of, I think that this was just shambolically put together in a weekend because they ran out of time to make the 24 episode limit. It was a case of, I do not care for the creative choices you made. But that's a conversation to be had in diplomatic fashion. Whereas something like Night Terrors, for example, I'm like, you guys just shat this out in a weekend, didn't you? But at the same time, I totally understand people who miss 24-episode things, because as much as I shit on something like, say, Night Terrors or Let He Who Is Without Sin, Old Trek always had it where no matter how bad the episode was, there was always going to be at least 1 or 2 or 3 scenes that were just great character development, that were really evocative sci-fi conversations, that were just fun character moments. And you lose some of that fabric when you move over to a shorter season. And how much of that you get back with really smart writing is going to vary. I think that Discovery struggles with that later on in the season, where you lose some of the breathing room. Whereas I think Strange New Worlds balanced it really well. So I totally understand why people miss the 24-episode season, because there is just so much more to enjoy. But overall, I think in terms of feasibility and the product that you end up with, I'm fine with a 10 to 13 episode season. I totally understand. I think it works for this, but for modern TV. But I totally understand why people don't vibe with that.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the side of quality over quantity myself. Um, like you should be fine with having just one Deanna Troy mind assault episode.
Oh,
Like one good
We've
mind
had
assault
one,
episode.
yes.
Versus...
What about a second Deanna Troy mind assault
No.
episode?
You want to focus all your resources into just the one really good Deanna Troy getting her mind assaulted on the show episode.
And then they'll make a movie about it as well. Sorry.
Yeah, and because this is the first series that tries to do like really long arc stories. I mean, there were great like mini arc stories in the last season of Enterprise. Like, I think that actually would have been a better format for Enterprise from the get-go to just do like 2, 3, 4 episode mini arcs. So this is the first show where they try to do that. So the danger when you're doing arc series isn't having a bad episode. It's having an episode where nothing happens, where everything's just kind of transition and exposition. Like you see this in Game of Thrones sometimes. You see this in recent Rings of Power. You see these episodes where it's just all exposition leading up to the next episode. I think Discovery actually managed to avoid that for the most part. They managed to balance that, especially since the Discovery is essentially 2 6-episode arcs and then 1 overreaching arc in the first season.
Like, in the first season, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a clear cutoff halfway through when they go into the other place. I don't know why I'm trying to avoid spoilers. This show came out in 2017. There's a clear cutoff where they go into the mirror universe halfway through the series, and it becomes a second mini arc. But yeah, if it lets them focus and have this higher production value and higher allowance for acting, I mean, that's the thing. Like, whether you like the acting or not, you can tell that there's much more space given to the actors on these shows to express themselves and to develop their characters.
Yeah,
which is ironic because of one of Discovery's biggest complaints is that it's the Burnham show and the other actors don't get that time, which I can see a 24 episode season giving you more. You get a Harry Kim episode, you get a whatever episode, which is not really allowed in the.
That is kind of what you miss with going from 13 to 24, and I think you definitely don't get the Kayla Detmer episode like people have been asking for. People want to know more. It was a common complaint with seasons 1 through 3 is like you never got more of the other bridge crew, but on the other side of that they weren't main cast-ish. Like the main players were Burnham, Saru, Giorgio. I think people sort of clamoring for the old style. Everyone on the bridge crew gets an episode. Was sort of more of the old format as what they're kind of doing with Discovery, which they've gone back to in Strange New Worlds. On the other side,
but it's not like Sulu ever got an episode.
No, exactly. He not really.
I don't know
or Uhura or Scotty to an extent.
It's not like this is different. This is any change. Awashihun gets an episode. Saru gets an episode. There are focus episodes on other members of the bridge crew. This pilot is interesting in that it only has 2 members of the regular bridge crew cast.
Let's talk about.
Technically 3, but yeah.
Yeah.
Technically.
Yeah. So I definitely prefer the quantity, and it's not necessarily one or the other. Like you can't have.
Yeah, no, totally.
But the point is, I'm not going to watch a show I don't like anyways. So if I'm watching a show I like, I'd rather have 24 episodes than 10. So all the different stuff that can suffer, a lot of that is, it's interconnected, but it's not all totally dependent. You can have bad writing episodes that go nowhere, filler stuff in a 10 episode, and you can have, quality 90% of the time in a bigger season, I feel like. So,
yeah, totally.
You ask, rhetorical or not, how many episodes are bad in TNG in a season, and for me it's only 1 or 2. Maybe that's just
Shades
because I love certain series, but no, in terms of going back and watchability, there have been 10 episode seasons of shows where I'm I kind of only like 2 of these, but TNG or DS9, all but maybe 1 in a season. I'm I don't really on a rewatch. I very rarely skip, and that's because I like the series.
I
actually agree with you,
especially
Otto.
because
Yeah.
because even the bad episodes in old Trek add to the fabric. Because I remember when I came to see you, like we didn't watch the good episodes, we watched the bad ones because they're hilarious. And like that's the problem with like kind of new Trek is that everything is so high quality and like polished, and you don't usually get when you get a bad episode, it's bad because you didn't like the creative choices, not because it was like a fucking shambolic mess that you can just point and laugh at, like Code of Honor.
I think
Or it's like
that's a symptom of TV being different these days. Like we've moved on to the 90s syndication kind of model where it's just like we need 24 episodes because that's what we need to fill out the season. Like, and it's got to be whatever quality. Now it's different. It's a whole different scenario now where we probably won't get those stereotypical bad episodes that would just have to fill out the calendar because people are watching in a different way. But
it's
go on.
I just want to say, ironically, you actually do get more than 10 to 13 episodes now in this new golden age of Star Trek, because the second one series ends, another series starts up, and then another series starts up. Like, when have we had a year where you could just have new Star Trek come into you almost every week?
Not to say there haven't been bad episodes in some of these 13 episode seasons, because there have. Like, there have been some episodes where we're kind of going that wasn't so great.
But like Otto said about like TNG, I enjoy watching all of TNG with like very few exceptions. But yeah. Anyway.
And I do feel like most of those ones that we do want to skip are because of the period they're created in. Like the Janice Lester episode. Like you're not gonna record that one today. So it's the really questionable. Like, okay, I don't know how to put it in words. Like the stuff that's not socially acceptable. That's the reason I want to skip it, not because
it's aged poorly. Yeah,
it's like filmed
which
bad.
Which is a better reason to watch it
like
and laugh
that.
at it, because that's you've kind of got to watch the bad to understand why it's bad. Or especially the socially unacceptable ones, you kind of got to have that as a learning point to explore why this shouldn't be done again. Thank you, William Shatner, for trying to impersonate a woman. But moving back to the pilot, let's get back on topic with the actual episodes we just watched. Listen, guys, what did you think of the Klingons? So this is a massive departure from... Well, not massive departure from the Klingons in the past, but definitely a different interpretation that was radically different. And it's not as if Klingons haven't been redesigned in the past, like obviously with the motion picture and TNG, changing from the TOS aesthetic of, white men in blackface, trying to do some sort of pan-Asian culture, whatever it was that they're trying to do at the time. But this is definitely a reinterpretation for the 21st century. What was your reaction at first, and how do you kind of feel now? It's been 5 years. Has it been 5 years? 5 years, yeah, 5 years since the introduction of those Klingons. What do you guys think of it? And I'm going to go to you, Stars, first.
So my thoughts on the Klingon redesign are, I get why they did it, because I'm pretty sure that it was either Brian Fuller or someone else on production staff said they wanted the Klingons to feel alien again. And that is a totally valid approach to take, because by the end of Enterprise, the Klingons were just so old hat. You could literally look at almost any Klingon character, and by inference, if you knew Star Trek, you could guess what they were going to do. They were going to fight, they were going to backstab, they were going to do this, they were going to do that. They were not... with the odd exception of a Gowron or a Kempek, you were not going to get any kind of high concept political or cultural movement. They were a monolith. They did not change. And moving to make them scary and weird and alien again is a totally valid choice. I think that culturally they do things that are interesting and that do fit within the realms of canon, like stuff like, I remember people complaining, Klingons don't mummify their dead. There's literally a reference in Search to Spock to Klingon mummification glyphs. Everything that, they even do the Klingon death scream. Like, these clearly are choices made by fans of Star Trek who want to keep, faithful to what makes Klingons. But in terms of the visual aesthetic, it's a rapid departure. And I think that it was really hard to commit to. Because they are, especially with the mouth prosthetics, making it hard to commit to the more authentic Mark Okran. Because this is the thing about Klingon language, is that they created it back in the 60s or 70s. Mark Okran, who's a proper linguist. It's a proper language.
Who's that old?
And for them, I'm pretty sure it's quite old.
Really? I thought that wasn't until like 80s,
I'd have to,
maybe, or
maybe
what, 79 maybe, yeah.
Feel free to fact check me. But here's the thing, right? Is that like it was not a hard and fast rule that you had to say everything in Klingon properly. You said it however you as an actor felt it was right to say it. And that led to Klingon kind of just becoming brah, 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 brah. Like, you know, like we made fun of that in the broken bow thing, and it's like them switching over to no, this is how you are meant to say these words in Klingon, plus mouth prosthetics, plus no hair, plus the absolutely elongated like craniums. It's a very rapid departure. A little bit. And it's like, I feel like they could have accomplished the same alien effect just by how militaristic and cultish and insular and like this like feverishly like devoted to Kugma sect are. Because that's something I actually really appreciate about the pilot is when they have the other houses come in and they're like, what the fuck are you guys doing? What the hell? What is all this? Why are you like setting off random beacons and feuding with the Federation? Like, that's just a shitty old like little cruiser thing. We're not interested. Like, I love that they are explicitly called out as being a radical sect, and then especially later on in the season, it's clarified. Yeah, everyone else is just jumping on this bandwagon. Not all Klingons are like this. This is just a hyper focused in on one particular sect. That being said, they started to run it back really quickly in season 2. Worf looks the same as he always does in Picard season 3. Lower Decks is not, as shown. It's like everyone has been kind of happy to leave the redesign alone and not really commit to it anymore. And I'm like, on one hand, I'm sad because I love that the character designs for Takuma and Vogue and L'Rell especially. I think L'Rell is awesome. But it's like it's too radical for some people, and I get it. Like, it's not. These are not choices I would have made. You know, especially with like the makeup and the prosthetics being quite so intense. Because I imagine it must have limited the actors in a way as well.
In terms of the acting and the language stuff, we need to ratify a law, call it like the Nimoy rule. If someone, if the quintessential person, or the Combs, the Shran rule, if the quintessential person of a species does something a certain way, just stick with that. Because like, there's a reason they became super ultra popular. You know,
you can get regional dialects. You can get, you know, how many different accents and languages do we have on our little pale blue dot? Like, you know, we've only seen
just on this podcast.
We have more than
you've seen like 5-6 different accents and regionalism.
Yeah, and I do them all badly.
I really appreciated the species diversity that they exhibited, the Klingons in this show. Like, I like that they went so far with it. I thought the language as spoken was lacked the musicality that I had come to associate with Klingon in the series. That was my only problem, that it was kind of slow and halting, not in the way that I had gotten used to Klingon being halting. But as you say, that could just be a dialect, that could just be an accent within the Klingon Empire. But this is a species that we've already seen like several different variations of Klingon in the previous series. And we know this species loves genetic manipulation. So of course there should be massive species deviation and range within this culture. They could have just solved it by when the other houses arrived, had them be all different types of Klingons.
Yeah.
Oh, you have a TNG one, a TNG style one.
That would have fixed everything, and everyone could have just shut the hell up. Or at the end, when L'Rell's talking to the Klingon like Senate, essentially, if there had been different factions and representatives of different species.
Funnily enough, that's how the Star Trek tabletop rectifies that problem.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So they did some good and some bad, and I haven't even decided whether I come down where I come down ultimately. Maybe after the end of when I'm done talking about it, I'll figure it out. But so I don't like anything that makes me as a viewer go, "Oh wait, I'm watching a TV show." And the mouth prosthetics do that for me, because how you know, the language or the haltiness or whatever. But if I hear someone, or I can imagine that they have their mouth full of plastic, I stop and think, oh wait, yeah, this is just a guy doing a role. So that, and the not as much here, but a little bit the shininess they sometimes do with aliens, especially Andorians in Discovery. It's like
It's more of a greasiness. I feel like I understand what you
Yeah.
mean. The Orions
Yeah.
get it quite bad as well in season 3.
Look at your screen right now. We're all very shiny right now. Like this is just natural. This is
Well, no, I know, but it doesn't look natural as a point, at least not to me. So those two things that take me out of it, it's like, I don't
If you
like
just
it.
take
But
off my prosthetic out.
that would explain
Oh god,
so
it
many
was
things.
Mission
about it.
Impossible mask all along.
But I do like the original language stuff. You know,
Hmm.
anything with subtitles, I like. It's like cool because then you can really. There's so much design space there. You know, for a video game term, so much stuff you can do with that. I like that. The redesign is fine. The physical stuff, the way they look, the way they whatever. They've done it before. They'll do it again. That kind of thing. Like I'm invested in the characters and the stories, not so much how they look. You can come up with some really absurd stuff, but if you have a good actor and a good story, you can sell it to me. So, as long as it's not taking me out of the story and being like, oh wait, that's just a guy delivering a role, I'm okay. So on balance, I think it was probably fine. I just wish they
Yeah.
would have, backed off a little bit on the
Yeah.
account stuff.
Going into...
I think one more last thing.
Go on, do that, and then yours.
I think that the one thing I will say about this redesign, especially in this pilot, is they use it to awesome effect for 2 moments, especially. And the first one is when Takuma's delivering that speech about his remain Klingon philosophy, and then you get him turning to the camera, and he just says, "Oh, we come in peace," in English, and it's just like you go from completely subtitled, thick Klingon, and you're like, "Oh, okay, you're talking about us," and that's a cool little. Okay, this is where that's a cool, like recontextualization and a good use of the language barrier. And the second one, I pointed out to you guys during the watch along, but I absolutely fucking love that moment when Giorgio is hailing them, and Takuma is like a friend who's watching you watch a YouTube video they really like, and he's like, "Wait for it," and then she says, "We come in peace," and he's like, "Ah, look!" Like all the aesthetic redesign, like that moment would not play as well if they were normal Klingons, original classic Klingons. It would not play as well. I feel like this redesign and the way they've done it would not. It really is in service of the story, which it should be.
I like it. We see a few sort of like Klingon heretics. Like we don't see many sort of like we don't see the sort of suburban, like country American sort of cult. This always feels like a cult that's nestled in a trailer park somewhere in America. That's enacted like, and it pretty much is, because of the ship that gets left derelict for how many years, and they're out there just sort of devoted to the words of Takuma and Kalek, and all that.
I know you want to move us along because you're good with time on this one.
I'm just looking at the.
One thing we said while we were watching is I like at one point the face off between, is it Vulcan and Takuma, like the black and white, because that's an easy analog for human viewers. Okay, people have different skin tones. Let's do it that way. So something where in other series with the Romulans, normal human forehead versus like obvious cranial structure, like that's something
Northern
that
and
to
Southern,
me is a little bit further of a gap. So I like the skin tone stuff, just in terms of, that's easy to digest as a viewer, I think.
Yeah, and it's also like going on to that point. That plays a big role in Voke's story and where he goes in this season, and it's a big part of the mirroring between his loss of Takuma and Burnham's loss of Giorgio. Like it does build toward that that big emotional, like, oh, we're not actually all that different, and Burnham learned to grow past that trauma. So again, it's in service of the story, and ultimately it should be in the end, which is why I like it.
Okay, how about let's talk about Burnham herself. So this is, the big criticism of Discovery is like a lot of people, and rightfully so. As myself as a fan of Discovery, I love the series, but I would do agree that it should be called Star Trek Burnham, because that is essentially, she is the main character of the show, and fine, that is what it is. Speaking of her entrance to the series as Spock's sister, which was kind of a thing that infuriated the fan base quite a bit. Everyone's seen the meme with the guy slapping the hood of the car as Spock, and them going like, this character can fit so many siblings in it. Between Cybok and Burnham, like he's just got people coming out of the woodwork. Do you think that Burnham should have been like just a random Vulcan's, apprentice. Like I love the fact that she is, Vulcan heritage. She was adopted into the system, but the fact it was Sarek and it was Spock's sister. And bearing in mind, let's discount the fact season 2 approaches and we have all the dynamic of Spock and Burnham interacting. Just for a season 1 starting point, how did you feel about Burnham being Spock's sister at this point? Did you feel it a bit too gratuitous, or did you find it was interesting?
A thought I had while we were watching is I would actually prefer it if she was biologically half Vulcan. And I know like the knee-jerk reaction is going to be, oh, you're just copying Spock. But that actually, she ends up so much different from Spock. Even if she played everything the same way, her being biologically half Vulcan gives you a chance to say, okay, what if Spock did go the other way and he embraced mostly human with just a hint of Vulcan instead of mostly Vulcan with, the kind of human, the heart of inside Tin Man that they try to give him. So the whole the brother sister stuff is, it's whatever. I maybe wouldn't have gone that way if I was writing from the ground up, but the fact they did doesn't really bother me. It's just all the emotional stuff. I think might have been better with the backdrop of, she actually is biologically Vulcan, and so her journey means a little bit more rather than a human behaving how a human would ultimately behave.
There you go.
Sure. I like that she was human. I think it's a great analog for immigrants assimilating into another culture. She was taken into the Vulcan, and we get to see her struggle between the culture of her motherland and the culture where she landed. And Sonequa Martin Green is a good enough actress that she was able to sort of present those levels, especially in the flashback to when she arrives first on the ship in her Vulcan garb. We see how her characterization is then very, very Vulcan at that point, to how she's loosened up 7 years later as Giorgio's first officer. So we get to see that journey within the episode. We get to even her as a child sort of struggling to master the Vulcan tongue and become more Vulcan because she's trying to fit into the Vulcan culture. She's trying to assimilate. So I like that she was not Vulcan, that she was actually human. It's an interesting take. And even though you want us to ignore this, ignore where it goes, it eventually goes on to present amazing interaction with Spock and the clan Sarek. Like I want a House of Sarek reality TV show after that season. So
Vulcan Shaw,
So
you're saying?
oh no, that's awful. So I feel like it's really important they do not position her as the sister of Spock in this episode. The importance of who she is related to is entirely in relation to Sarek. So Spock is not named. You only know she's related to Spock through because you know who Sarek is. And I think that, let's be real here, Vulcans are fucking racist. They are really racist. And they're going to dig into that in Strange New Worlds, and they do it in Enterprise. That's what Discovery does really well, is that it creates a nice narrative bridge between Enterprise and TOS in terms of justifying where Vulcan culture goes. And let's be real here. If you want this story of a woman who is caught between two cultures, who is struggling with her trauma and then is brought into a culture of intense emotional suppression and management, can you think of another Vulcan other than Sarek who would actually let that happen, who is open to human experimentation? Sarek is explicitly called out as being weird for marrying a human, for having a half-human son. He is considered strange amongst other Vulcans for that. So if it weren't Sarek, you would have to create not Sarek. You would have to create Sorek, or whatever the fuck you want to call him.
Yeah, that is true. I didn't
because you need to justify why she is brought into the Vulcan, because Vulcans don't do that. But Sarek would, because Sarek is interesting in Vulcan culture for that. And the thing with it being called Star Trek Discovery versus calling Star Trek Burnham is they are kind of actually synonyms, because the entire thing is Burnham discovering herself and working out who she really is. And that's the core tenet behind every season of Discovery, is rediscovering who you are in every moment and finding out that there's multitudes within us. And for her, it's realizing, yeah, the Vulcan stuff within me provided a decent bedrock, but the instant I came up against the source of my trauma, it fell apart every time. Like, not just in the learning center, but in the conflict with the Klingons, she doesn't even have time to de-escalate. Her trauma response is immediately, no, I have to kill him. And it just goes in for the Batleth EV suit strike. And coming from that place of trauma, like, it's kind of important that she be like this. It's like, it's an interesting... Like, Burnham is really interesting as a Star Trek protagonist because she is so badly damaged by, like, her life up to this point, whereas Picard and Sisko and Janeway all have their own various traumas that they've lived with and kind of grown to be accustomed with, Burnham is in this place where everything that's bad that's happened to her, she has not learned to deal with it yet. She is like, she starts off where Picard is in Family, trying to wrestle with thinking that she's put a lot of it behind it, but she hasn't. And in terms of communicating the place where she's actually at, I think Sonequa Martin Green does a really good job in terms of communicating trauma and all these varying different levels of emotional suppression and how she relates to people. And she can do Vulcan snobbiness just as she can do it so well. And it's really hilarious, like, seeing her have to back up and go, okay, right, yeah, you're not going to give me shit. You know how to deal with Vulcans with Georgiou.
Listen, if they hadn't cast her as Burnham, like, I could have seen in Strange New Worlds her being the third Sarvik. Like, at some point, like, she could have done that quite well.
No, not Sonequa Martin Green as T'Pring. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I hope Lower Decks introduces a fourth sibling, just to screw with everyone.
Well, you know what? That's also a thing. Is that it's like, man,
Sarek could just not help himself, could he? He's just like,
well, Spock has precedent for not telling his best friend, his captain, his shipmate of God knows how long, hey, by the way, it's my mother and father who are beaming over. I'm not going to tell you.
Right.
I will not tell you until they are literally staring you in the face. Spock has precedent for this. He's a dramatic bitch.
He is. By the way, did I tell you I have this way of, like, coming back from death if I die? But I'm not going to tell you. I'm just going to hug my friend's face.
Did I tell you that Vulcans have a secondary eyelid? But I'm not going to tell you that, McCoy. I'm going to let you think you blinded me for no reason.
Yeah.
I remember.
Did I tell you I go into a murderous sexual rage every 7 years? Should I mention that? Oh, I'm sorry. I could have sworn I wrote it down somewhere.
It's in the databases, but no one checked. It's fine.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, you guys love Discovery way too much. Yes, it should have been called Star Trek Burnham, and that definitely turned off a lot of fans, including me. The scene where they're at Red Alert and they're being scanned by some unknown, and what's going on? Everything's blinding white, and cameras, like, they put the camera on a string and they're spinning it around their head, and it's super intense. But hold on, she's got to go to her quarters, talk to her dad for 5 minutes, and then come back. Like, could you ever see Jean-Luc at Red Alert go, hold on, guys, I know we're about to die, but let me go to my ready room and chat with someone for 5 minutes. It's like
that is a common complaint with Discovery. And
wait a minute. Well, how many times did Data put Picard and the rest of the crew on hold because he was doing something to save the ship? Like 3 or 4 times. He's like, I'll get back to you, Captain. I'm detecting these Romulans. I can't just tell you. I'm just going to do it on my own.
So 3 or 4 times in 7 seasons. How many times does Burnham save everyone? Like, a lot. It's a lot more than that. So just in terms of, is it Star Trek Burnham? It obviously is.
Yeah.
We'll agree with that.
But then is TOS Star Trek Kirk?
No, because you kind of do get... It is still the ensemble cast, but then again, it is of a different TV production era, so it's...
Well, okay, so for an example, I've fallen off the Discovery bandwagon many times, and I think in season 3 or something, Idol told me, because my friends love Discovery, you guys love Discovery, you're always trying to pull me back in, and told me, oh no, this is an ensemble. They do a lot of other stuff with the other characters. So I go, okay. So I tried it. I watched it out. There were 13 scenes with Michael Burnham in it. So I'm like, okay, I kind of get what you're saying, but it's still Star Trek Burnham. So, if we jump back to the serialization versus episodic stuff, if you don't like Star Trek Burnham, you're not going to like Star Trek Discovery. So.
No. I think that's kind of like what I would say to anyone that is like an old school Star Trek fan that hasn't watched it, is like you will accept it more if you realise that the series is not misnamed, but it is if you think of it as Star Trek Burnham, it is a lot more enjoyable to realise there's more following a main character as opposed to an ensemble cast. If you know that going in, you might still not like it, but you know why.
Which I wish they would have marketed that harder, because we just rewatched episodes 1 and 2, and I liked it a lot more than the first time. I tried literally 4, 5, 6 times. I couldn't get past the first few minutes because I'm like, I don't want this. I don't like this. This is not what I'm used to. This is not not my Trek. So, I wouldn't say I've stuck my heels in the whole time. I've watched almost every episode up till season 4. I'm not totally caught up, but it's like, if they would have marketed that, I think part of my change over time is that you have time to assimilate, okay, this is actually what it's about. You have to view it in that this is not going to be, Deep Space Nine season 8 or whatever.
It's about setting expectations, which is totally valid. But I just think it's also a case of Star Trek Burnham doesn't have the same ring to it. That's harder to market. It's harder to market.
You say that, but they came out with Star Trek Picard, so...
who is an iconic character who had a 7-season show. You get away with that when you've got that legacy, but Sonequa Martin Green came from Walking Dead, and Burnham is an unknown character who is being put into a kind of awful position of being related to legacy characters, where it's like, I wouldn't want to call it Star Trek Burnham either. That's a bad foot forward.
I can't wait to start.
And how is Star Trek Picard working? How is Star Trek Picard working out for people?
Yeah. We'll get onto that at some point.
And I like it.
Yeah. I have mixed feelings. Okay, well, let's talk about Burnham's mutiny. Kind of the last fun like before we go on to ratings. So one of the penultimate moments in episode 1, at least before it leads on to episode 2, is Burnham has a theory and a rational decision about what sort of, consults with Sarek and says this is how the Vulcans dealt with the Klingons all those many years ago. They fired first to assert dominance in the wider scope of the story. And then she, Giorgio, being captain, rightfully says, no, I'm not going to do that. We're going to go do my way. And pretty much every other first officer in the history of the series would probably go, I don't agree with this, but okay, I'm a loyal serving Starfleet officer, we're going to do it that way. Or they'd just steal a shuttlecraft and do it themselves. Whatever, you're not Riker, who knows. But Burnham does give her the Vulcan nerve pinch and essentially mutinies and tries to take command of the ship. So do you guys feel that she was justified to take that action based on her past traumatic experiences, or do you feel that was a little bit of a leap too far? Stars.
I'll go, yeah. So here's the thing, right, is that Burnham is the protagonist, and in most TV series, you would kind of expect everything for your protagonist to do to be the correct choice. How often in TNG does Picard make a bad decision? Like, it's not often. It does happen, and every time it's called out for it, like, Lower Decks has an entire episode calling out a bad decision he made in season 1 of TNG.
He did stay and read to Kamala in the dark that one time, which was a little bit naughty because she was someone else's girl.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about as bad as it got for Jean-Luc.
Yeah. but it's like, you're used to the protagonist making the right decision, right? But Burnham just makes completely the wrong decision, right? The tragedy of it is that Giorgio is completely correct. She is not thinking clearly. She has been concussed, exposed to radiation. She has been literally confronted by the ghost that killed her parents of the Klingons. She is in a high-tension environment. She feels the need to prove herself. Everything that she loves is on this ship and in danger. And so what does she do? She goes, I need to come up with a logical justification that will make everyone suddenly see sense and that I'm right. Because it's really important that she be right. Because if she's not right, then what is she? That's what kind of a big part of what Burnham's character actor arc actually is. She cannot be wrong, otherwise what is she? She struggles with that a lot, especially in season 2. So she goes to Sarek and she's like, well, tell me how the Vulcans dealt with this, right? And he goes, well, we did this. And there's a tone in James Fraser's voice which is like, this is a thing that is true, but I don't necessarily think this is applicable to your situation or that it's going to help. And she goes, cool, thanks for the info. We're going to go and do this. Because this is the logical key that will unlock it, and you'll all see that I was right and I can save you. But no, you're just coming up with the logical justification for your illogical trauma response.
Confirmation bias, one might say.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And when Giorgio says, no, you're not thinking clearly, she mutinies. And it's because she is so terrified of losing everything that she has. And it's the wrong decision, but I get it. And the thing that gets a bit mixed up in all this conversation is, and it comes up at the end of the episode, is that she is not held responsible by the Starfleet Admiralty for causing the Klingon War, because, let's be real, especially as the audience, we know there was never a chance. Regardless of what would have happened, Takuma would have forced a confrontation because that's what he wanted. He wanted a conflict for his culture to unite against. So regardless of whether or not they had fired or if they didn't, it wouldn't have mattered. Because Takuma put them in an impossible position.
Maru, one might say.
It's literally a no-win scenario. And Burnham fails because you can't win. And her tragedy is that she has to live with the guilt of not knowing it was a no-win scenario. Well, she comes to live with it later on after much trauma. Like, that's the thing. She is in this Kobayashi Maru scenario, but she doesn't get a simulator or an admiral walking out of the shadows to tell you there was no way to win. She just gets, like, drummed off because of the mutiny, and it sucks. But it's a really interesting journey for her to come back from that, because, like I said, she's a character who functions on being right, and when everyone is telling her she's wrong, it completely destroys her and leaves her in this really awful emotional place that she has to rebuild herself from, and she comes back a lot healthier, which is why I really love her growth through season 2 and 3. But that's my long-form decision. No, she was not right to do this, but it was an impossible decision.
Shy.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Stars said there.
All right, also.
It's the more interesting. Okay, it's the more interesting. It's the more interesting dramatic choice to have her be wrong right off the bat, to have her fail logically because of her human emotions and trauma. The question this scene raised for me was, is Sarek good at being an ambassador? Like, is he actually competent as a diplomat? Because he's always disagreeing with Spock, and Spock's right. And now he's sort of leading Burnham down the wrong path. So why is Sarek a senior ambassador for the Vulcan?
Let's be real here. Sarek is always a douchebag no matter what film or TV series he's in.
He triggers Tellarites just for sport. Like, right, he doesn't need to tick them off, but he wants to tick them off.
Right. He did the journey to Babel. What a cunt. I love it.
Yeah, you could have just told him. Just tell him what your vote is. Like, what?
Also,
instead of a storyline answer, I'll go the level above and say, just as a design choice or whatever. No, it's a microcosm for me of Discovery where it's not justified. Like, and we mentioned this. I forget exactly what it was. It was one of the earlier pilots we reviewed, but where we said this would be like a cool story. I think it was maybe Farpoint or something. This would be a cool story, but do it in like episode 3 or 4. Don't do it right off the bat. So they cram, it feels like they're trying to cram all this stuff in there that's not justified. Like, if she mutinies, do I really care? No, because I just met her. I don't know anything about her. If you show me 3 or 4 episodes of her as Giorgio's trusted right arm, and then she mutinies, oh shit, like she betrayed her, that means something. So it's a lot of the... it's not just me. This is maybe one of the biggest ones complaints that you hear about Discoveries. They do a lot of unearned stuff. So where they when they stand there and go, "We're Starfleet," we do it. They literally say, "We're Starfleet," and we do it the right way. That's like a Red Squad moment where they're trying to like pep talk people, but it's a show don't tell thing. So No,
I remember
the fact that it happened doesn't bother me. If it happened in, like I say, a later episode, like that's cool. You can do a lot with it, but you have to give it the backstory, otherwise it doesn't have the oomph when it happens.
I remember when after season 1 wrapped, I remember someone telling me, "I like the season, but if you had swapped episode 3 and put it in front of episodes 1 and 2, so that you get all the setup of her being the prisoner on the Discovery, and all of the you caused the Klingon War, and then it leads to this confusion, and you empathize with her, and then you get episodes 1 and 2 as like a flashback, as context for it. That would kind of more work.
Yeah,
I haven't tried that, but I think as a 3-parter, that would kind of make sense.
That's kind of cool.
No,
Because
see, I like the fall. I like the fall from grace. I like seeing her confident, arising. She's about to be promoted to captain. Giorgio's pulling out the center seat for her. And then in the next episode, after the first two, we see her in prisoner, yellow jumpsuit.
Yeah,
getting ready to do sweatless work at the Tom Paris's penal colony.
One thing I did mention then while we were watching is even just swapping the scenes before she goes and guts a Klingon in her EV suit. What if we saw first the reason why she instinctually doesn't like Klingon? And I understand the way they did it is she has several flashbacks throughout when she's unconscious throughout the episode, and so that it makes sense from that point of view. But just in terms of investing getting the viewers to invest in what they're seeing. If I knew the reason why she had that gut reaction, then I'd be watching a lot more what she does when she's, flying around in her EV suit, and when that confrontation happens, that would just make more sense to me, I think.
Yeah, the second she sees the Klingon glyph on the ship, they could have flashed back to her childhood scene.
Wait, what if I don't hate Discovery? What if I just think that it's all in the wrong order? And if they
maybe you just put an editing issue.
I actually love Discovery, but they just put it in the wrong order.
Yeah, you're watching the.
Maybe you need a different cut.
Yeah, you're watching the Fox order, not the airing, not the actual production order. Yeah,
you need Topher Grace to do a supercut for you, and then you'll really love it.
All right, Stars, I need you to give me your rating criteria.
We're not doing favorite scene and best players.
Well, we're running on for a bit of time. I want to keep these sharp.
Come on, man.
All right. Let's do best worst moment, then we'll do your rating. So, also, give me your best.
Don't start with me on this.
All right,
the guy that pushed for it has to go first.
All right, Stars, give me your best or worst moment.
Okay, well, best moment, I'm gonna, since I've been handed the opportunity, I'm gonna say best moment is absolutely Burnham in the cell with the computer.
Yeah.
If you wanted to tell me who Burnham is in a single scene, just show me that. She's resourceful, she's intelligent, she's got that Vulcan logic down to a pinch, she has that slightly Kirkian Maverick vibe where it's like, I know the rules better than you, and I can manipulate them, and I know that I'm right in this instance, and I'm going to use it to get myself out of an impossible situation. There's something very Star Trek about it, and very Burnham, and that's what I appreciate about her character, is that essential Star Trek spirit where she's just a smart woman doing smart things. For me, worst moment... oh god, it's hard, because I do like the pilot quite a bit for the most part. I would say, I'm going to say it. The worst part of the scene is actually the end of the episode with the shadowy cabal of admirals telling her that she's been committed to the penal colony or whatever, because it's just way too overdramatic.
Nuclear weapon to New York.
And I get it. I get why. Like Shai, you made the great point that it's like if you think of it more as Burnham's emotional perspective, it totally makes sense. It's like, that's fine. But Star Trek is usually a little bit too literal for that. Usually, if you want to color the scene like that, you have to give a reason for it. Like someone is mentally unstable, or they've been drugged, or they're in like a higher plane of existence. But here, it's like that is presented to us as exactly how it happened in reality, where Starfleet can't pay the electric bill, and they're telling this woman that she's lost her career in the darkest of night.
Look, I heard somewhere that Walmart spends $18,000 a month to pay their electrical bill. So that's just something I heard maybe during the watch through. I agree with you. The logic scene, logic in the computer, get out of the brig is my favorite scene by far. My worst moment, and I mentioned this during the watch through, it's not even in the episode. It's the choice by CBS to air the first episode on broadcast television, and then to stick the second half behind the paywall of then CBS All Access.
Yes, that's
because
what
most
it
of the
was, wasn't
action, most of the action is backloaded in the second half of this pilot two-parter. So the first part, you're just kind of watching, not an exposition dump. I think there's some
People
good character
talk,
development in there. People talk, things happen, but it's a lot of talking and then no action, and then you have to go and sign up for your free trial of All Access. So it was that's my least favorite part about and some of the fight choreography is weak in this episode, considering you have Michelle Yeoh, who is one of the greatest action stars in the history of film.
Idol, best and worst moment.
Oh, you're gonna go to me first. Okay.
Well, I need to give Otto time to warm up.
Okay. You need to think a bit. Best moment is probably just Doug Jones in overall, just like introduction to reintroduction for a lot of people to Doug Jones. I mean, people have seen him in lots of other things, and him coming to Star Trek was just a blessing in disguise. And realizing, actually, yeah, he's still awesome. Like, he acts through that makeup like so well, and he will continue to do so through the whole episode. But I think like it was episode 1 when they introduced Saru, and I went, I want to see this character throughout the entire series, and then I was absolutely blessed with lots of Saru moments, and so I was very happy. Worst moment? I don't really know. No, I haven't really got a specific...
There's just so many to choose from.
Oh,
it's
there
really
really
hard
is. No, I don't know. From what has already been mentioned, yeah, maybe a complete lack of Giorgio's, Michelle Yeoh doing any decent sort of like action scenes, which is such a shame because of her pedigree. You know, it's terrible. But...
Well, the truth is, if you don't have J.W. Peppa against her to really bring out her incredible work on screen, she just doesn't work. So we'll be doing Bond talks next week, folks. By the way.
Oh, I'm down for that.
Listen, Tomorrow Never Dies is the first film, one of the first films I saw in the cinema, but go on.
Oh, dude, I was watching that the other day. Tomorrow Never Dies fucks, man. That is a
so
great
good.
Bond movie.
It's so good.
Also, best and worst moments, please.
So they're not moments. They're kind of like...
Here you go for it.
But I have two best. I'm going to surprise you guys. I have two best.
Hey!
One is the ship cinematography. I think they did great with that. When they strapped the GoPro onto the little sarcophagus, and then and it was a little bit, it's kind of cheesy, but then it lands and they like pull out and they show everything. It's almost like they went from practical on like a model to CGI, and it was just a really cool transition for me. A lot of the ship hero shots I really liked. The design of the Klingons looking very like the nacelles with the spires coming out. It looked very like...
Very Imperial,
cool.
yeah.
And then the stuff inside with the Klingons, which I know I said it kind of pulled me out of the moment, but the original language stuff is a hit with me in terms of making them feel alien and making you think you know what to expect watching Star Trek since you've watched it for 40 years, but you go into this and you have to reset your mind a little bit. So I did like those. Worst moment is like minute 3 through 6, I think. First,
minute 3 through 60.
No, this one stands out. They're bickering in Ready Room with Giorgio, and then they go out on the bridge and bicker, and it was really high school drama for me. And I literally had to watch this 4, 5, 6 times before I could get past that point in the show because I just didn't enjoy it. And so there are a few times in the show overall where I keep watching because I enjoy it, and they're definitely there. But mostly it's because all my friends are all my Star Trek fans, have watched it, and I want to be able to talk about it with them and that kind of thing. So, but getting over that hump right at the beginning was tough because I've said it before, but I like my professionals. If you're going to put them at the helm of a $250 starship, they shouldn't be bickering like that from minute one.
You're fine with Wesley sitting there.
Well, it's like it's the pilot unearned stuff. If that's going to be your introduction to the show, it should be set the tone and then go off into all the different stuff. Wesley wasn't piloting from episode 1.
All right, Stars, give me your rating, please.
All right, gentlemen. How many illegally photon warhead mined Klingon corpses that contravene the 1948 Geneva Convention out of
the Klingon Accords don't happen for another 30 years?
How long are you making these?
I will continue to wear this into the ground. So, How many contraventions of the 1948 Geneva Convention out of 10 would you like to give this?
And
Also,
even if we come up with a better one, Stars won't use it because he's got to have his own. So I'm going to throw out like all the most logical, funny ones first, just to see how far we can push him into obscurity. With these.
yeah, don't worry, I'll commit to the bit. I'll go as obscure as you fucking want. How many Sonequa Martin Green acting through blinks out of 10?
She
She's
blinks
sending
like
us a
3
message.
times the whole way.
All right, so I'll give you 2 ratings. The first time I watched it, because I love hearing Shai's perspective on these as the elder statesman in the room, because he saw these at a more mature age than most of us. But I was there for Discovery, so I can say how I felt. My first time watching, 1 out of 10. I couldn't. I literally couldn't get through it. And I'm a guy that loves Star Trek, so. But on a rewatch, mentally adjusted, your banter over the dialogue that I didn't love, I'd say more like a 4 out of 10. I loved a lot of the, like I said, the cinematography, with exceptions, the blinding white and the spinning the camera around. But yeah, the ship stuff was good. I like the Klingon stuff. A lot of the design stuff I agreed with, but there's so many plot holes where it's like, okay, would a professional on the starship do something like that? And if the answer is no, then it kind of takes me out. So.
Shai, how many illegally photon warhead mined Klingon corpses that contravene the 1948 Geneva Convention out of 10?
Oh, it's 9. It's 9 out of 10.
Wow.
This pilot hit it out of the park for me. Like, this was a quantum leap forward in terms of diversity, in terms of complexity of acting.
No, wait, that's Broken Bow.
In terms of no. It's definitely not Broken Bow. In terms of introducing arc storytelling to the franchise, like the Star Trek franchise, I thought it was great. It's cinematic. The ship porn is amazing. Even I wasn't even crazy about the Klingon ship redesigns or the Herc technology, as you guys have enlightened me. But it was really well done. The Federation ships are amazing. I love all the call forwards to TOS and later shows. The creature design was excellent. Saru was instantly a classic creature design, and I like the uniforms.
Yeah, the uniforms are great.
So-
And shout out to I think the Krepluskans, I believe, like on the desert planet they go to.
Gesundheit.
That's all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The Swiss.
Yeah, they're a great design.
Yeah, just a few quibbles here and there. The some pacing with Burnham's decision to mutiny, and some of the action and the choice to break it up into 2 parts. That's the only thing that takes it away from me. But otherwise, I've watched this season 1 repeatedly, and I really enjoy it.
Idle, how many illegally photon warhead mined Klingon corpses that contravene the 1948 Geneva Convention out of 10?
I'm torn. I'm torn between 7 and 8, so I think I'm going to go for a 7.5. I'm going to give it a 0.5 on this. I'd say we shouldn't do that, but this I can't not do
It's
it. Like,
your show, dude. You can do whatever you want.
I really enjoyed it. Like, I think it's probably this is probably the 3rd time I've watched it. And I enjoy it a little bit more each time, especially when, like Otto says, I temper my expectations from what I know and from what other people say, and how I enjoyed this watching as a group as well. Few little issues here and there, like Shai says, like, this is, they split it between broadcast and streaming, and there was a few controversies about the Klingons, and the whole, they can send out a big blinding white light and everyone in the quadrant can see it. There's a few little sort of breakthroughs of like laws of physics things there that Star Trek totally has done, but also hasn't done in the past. So I kind of 7.5 and an 8. It's not the best thing ever. It's not my favorite pilot, but I did really enjoy it. It kept me entertained throughout the whole way through. Go
on. For me, I would probably give this 8 out of 10.
How many illegal mine corpses out of Geneva Convention? Blah, blah, blah.
Thank you. See, that's the thing. These jokers made the mistake of mentioning, "Oh, we're a little bit short on time," and I had to make sure I had to give them the longest out of 10 possible. I'd
How
give
many
it probably
perfectly justifiable warfare tactics out of 10 do you?
How many
give them-
Cisco genocides out of 10 would you give it?
There you go. That's an interesting discussion to have. I'd probably give this an 8. I think every performer is like right out of the gate, they're doing their best. Even Shazad Latif is doing really good work through that prosthetic makeup. Like I mentioned, he's easily the Klingon who is best adjusting to that prosthetic makeup and getting his lines out there
Latif? Oh my god!
Yeah,
Totally
spoilers for a
wasn't
5-year-old
checked
show.
at the time, yeah.
Shaniqua Martin Green does a really
Fandango. Anyway, sorry.
yeah, whatever, toast. Shaniqua Martin Green is hits the ground running. Here's the thing. Even if you disagree with Burnham's writing choices, I feel like SMG, as she is known, is just such a good performer. She always brings her A game. She is never not giving 110%. Her chemistry with Michelle Yeoh is so good. You said also that you probably need a few more episodes to really buy the relationship. But what we have here is a really fun. I need to prod you into growing because both you and Saru are so disparate that I have to encourage you to compete and work together. I enjoy that dynamic quite a bit, even if it is quote unquote unprofessional. It probably is. Doug Jones, instantly incredible. Instantly. Even the ensign who, what's his name? Connor, who comes to Burnham in the brig and he's concussed and. That's a great scene, and he sells the fuck out of it because, in fact, he's only in the pilot for maybe 5 minutes.
All it's a very Saving Private Ryan moment.
Yeah, it really is actually. Nate, you say that, and it kind of opines about we're explorers, we shouldn't be having to do this, and it's this is the way that sometimes exploration goes down. All the production design choices I really appreciate, even if it's some of it didn't work for me, like the Klingon stuff, I like it and it's justified by the story, but overall it's not the choices I would have personally made. It's just a case of slightly it's also sour to me because knowing how the season wraps up, I don't like the resolutions, so it sets up a lot of stuff that does go somewhere, but some of it not as much. Stuff like the mouth prosthetics being so overpowering for some of the actors does kind of make it. I totally understand that criticism, and it's I can definitely understand why so many people were jarred by it as your reintroduction to Star Trek on the small screen for the first time in 12 years, as it was. That being said, this was exactly the kick in the arse that Star Trek needed to reinvent itself and become something that was still relevant in this day and age. Because even if you don't like Discovery and all the conversations it started, its success, what it did right, what it did wrong, what it did to improve itself, led to what I would absolutely consider to be the second golden age of Trek. And even if you don't like Discovery, it's responsible for Prodigy, it's responsible for Lower Decks, it's responsible for Picard, if that's your thing, it's responsible for Strange New World, which has been hailed as the second coming of Gene Roddenberry himself by some people, and it's all of that is down.
Which is ironic.
To the
Which is ironic considering. I'm sorry. It's ironic considering Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds is basically the second season of Strange New Worlds, and Discovery Season 2 is first season of Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. You're not wrong, actually.
It's ironic that people can't make that connection that Pike and that Spock and that number one are from Discovery. But anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No. It's a totally valid point because there's so much that Discovery does right, even if you don't appreciate it. And I understand because it's not for everyone's tastes. Like Otto said, some of the choices that they make cinematography and editing wise can be so jarring and off-putting, and one or two tweaks and you'd have something that would appeal to more people maybe. But ultimately it does do more things right than it does wrong, and I really appreciate it, and especially getting to see these characters grow, and boy do they grow over these seasons. I really appreciate getting to see them where they start. So yeah, 8 out of 10. That's how many illegally photon warhead-minded Klingon corpses that contravened the 1948 Geneva Convention out of 10 I would give this.
Yeah, no matter what you think of Alex Kurtzman's writing, I will say that he at least likes Star Trek as much as you do, whoever you are. You know,
He likes
Crichton
it more than
Star
J.J.
Trek.
Abrams.
He likes it more than J.J. Abrams, and Nicholas Meyer is better at Star Trek than whoever is watching this. Nicholas Meyer is better at Star Trek than everyone. So, you know, that's who's behind
He's
this
getting
show.
his own podcast. That's how good he is.
So good he is.
I would like to say one thing to put a bow on this.
A
Particularly
bow.
because, a bow on this. Particularly because it is Discovery. Now we've done a lot of reviews. We did like a bunch of Strange New Worlds. I think we're going to do Discovery coming up, but we've done a bunch of pilots. I think this is the first time where we've actually run the spectrum from someone saying, I hate this, to I love this. Usually we're mostly on the same page.
Yeah.
That being said, like I said, this was a one I literally couldn't sit through the first time I watched it, and I just had a lot of fun with my buddies watching through something that actually was much better this time than the first time I watched it. So if you guys are out here listening to us, even as your bedtime noise to fall asleep to, or because you know you want to hear some Trek nerds talk about Trek stuff, find a buddy who likes Star Trek. You know, they're out there for sure. If you found us, I'm sure you know you have other friends in the Trek network, as it were. Just call them up or send them a DM or whatever, and just be like, "Hey, you want to watch an episode?" Because trust me, it does a lot. It's the chicken noodle for the soul. When Stars was at my house, we were watching the literal worst of Trek that most people just flip through, and we were howling, dying of laughter. You always get something new, something better, something more when you watch it with friends.
Do I need to start like a Trek dating site for Trek needs friends? Like, do we need to find other
I'm
viewers?
sure they already have those.
Very possibly. All right, okay. Thank you everyone for watching. This has been our review of the Vulcan Hello. We'll be back soon on Star Trek.
And
Trek
Battle
Trek
at the
with-
Binary Stars.
And the Battle of the Binary Stars, yes. We'll be back very soon. I think we're going to throw this now to our subs to vote for the next episode. So look out for that on our sub channel.
You get
Man
to
trap.
choose.
Man trap.
You get to choose if you are a subscriber to our Twitch channel, not the YouTube channel, to our Twitch channel. Simply go to twitch.tv/Timelines Talks and subscribe there, and you can be in our exclusive sub channel, and we'll put a vote up soon to choose our next episode we're going to watch from one of the various series. Maybe it'll be Man Trap, maybe it'll be the next episode, maybe it'll be The Naked Now, who knows.
Just so you know, whatever episode is chosen, I will be reviewing Man Trap during that episode.
And you'll be speaking as us, acting as us, giving what you think our opinions
He's gonna have
would be.
hand puppets of that.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have Gertrude.
Otto, what do you think? I hate everything. I hate life. Oh, very good insight, Otto. Thank you.
What are you drinking, Gertrude? Well, I'm having.
I'm shocked you
Gertrude,
don't have
you need to go to the bathroom.
I'm shocked you don't have Gertrude, right next to you at this point in time.
I know. I had to go and get a disease.
And on that note,
On that note, hurrah!